the Finnish president was saying that Ukraine had accepted an unconditional ceasefire, and that is something that Vladimir Putin did not accept. And a lot of argument commentators saying that Russia is stalling for time. Just to give you a line coming from the Kremlin itself, because the Defense Ministry in Moscow has issued some words. They're accusing Ukraine of attempting to disrupt Russian-US peace talks. And they say that Ukraine did that by targeting an oil storage facility in Krasnodar territory just hours after the talks between the US and Russia took place. In a statement which is being reported by the Russian news agency RIA Novosti, the Russian Defense Ministry is saying that Ukraine used 3 drones against the facility involved in pumping oil via the Caspian pipeline, saying that such actions by the Kyiv regime are a deliberate provocation aimed at disrupting Trump's peace initiatives. And the ministry is saying that it shot down 7 of its drones aimed at energy facilities in Ukraine's Mykolaiv region after receiving Putin's order to pause attacks on Ukraine energy infrastructure. A little bit of context to all of this, because from the different lines coming from the White House and the Kremlin as to the conversation between Putin and Trump, one of the things that had arguably been agreed is the cessation of targeting energy infrastructure in Ukraine and in Russia. That was one thing that had been agreed, that some kind of all different aspects were not agreed, including the mobilization of Ukrainian military, including the provision of military aid and support and intelligence to Ukraine. That was not agreed. But one thing that both the White House and the Kremlin seemed to have some kind of accord on is the cessation of targeting of energy infrastructure. And yet overnight, what we saw was a large-scale Russian airstrikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, including Russian forces carrying out a drone attack on 2 hospitals in Ukraine's northern Sumy region. And also we saw the attacks by Ukraine into Russia. So when it comes to these ceasefire talks, it's incredibly fragile, and the conversations at the diplomatic level do not seem to be reflected on the ground. So again, a rather somewhat different perspective as to what is happening on the ground in both Ukraine and in Russia compared to what the diplomacy conversations are being held. So we're keeping an eye on all of that. But we do know that President Zelensky said that he expects to have a conversation with Donald Trump a little bit later on as well, because he'll want to have a debrief as to the conversation that Trump had with Putin yesterday. But we'll be seeing whether Trump will be ready to talk Ukraine into backing that 30-day ceasefire deal. But as we saw, he's not willing to threaten Russia in the same way. So a fascinating aspect to the diplomatic conversation there. Right. So we can now bring you up to date with some of the headlines that we have here on BBC News, because as I was saying, President Zelensky reiterating his refusal to trade any Ukrainian territory for peace. The Ukrainian president also confirming that he'll be speaking with his US counterpart, Donald Trump, about a possible ceasefire. That conversation will be taking place a little